The Vietnam War was quite different in many ways, especially when it came to artillery combat and tactics. Since in a regular war your artillery sits usually a considerable distance behind the front lines. Yet Vietnam was a war without fronts. In Vietnam, the front was in all directions and was only 55 or 109 feet away. This meant that artillerymen not only had to adapt to an up-close and personal combat, but also to a 360-degree environment, or probably better called a 6400 mils environment, whereas a mil is 1,000th of an inch, since that is what artillerymen usually work with. So gentlemen, welcome to Vietnam. Now during the early days of the Vietnam War, this was less of a problem, since artillery could be just flown in, provide fire support for the infantry and then repositioned rather quickly, before the enemy could threaten it. Yet over the course of the war this was not possible anymore. This is where one of the key innovations of the Vietnam War comes in, the firebase. Note that this was not something completely new, the French in their Indochina War also used something similar to firebases. But the US firebases were never overrun. Now be aware here that there were several different kinds of firebases, for instance the fire support base, the fire support patrol base, the fire support surveillance base and others. Yet for the sake of this video we just call it firebase. The short definition of a firebase is as follows. A small artillery base, usually temporary, uses a base from which to launch patrols and to support ground operations. So basically the firebase allowed to use artillery in a war without fronts and serve as a limited base camp as well. One of the key requirements for this was of course proper mobility, usually provided by helicopters that flew in men, material and the guns itself. The problem of course was that these firebases were rather vulnerable and could be attacked from any direction, since firing batteries had neither the personnel nor the expertise to defend their positions against determined enemy attacks. Accordingly, infantry units provided defensive troops. The position jointly occupied by supporting artillery and defending infantry was referred to as a firebase or fire support base. As such, the position of a firebase was chosen together by the artillery and infantry commanders. Generally, the following considerations had to be made when picking a proper location. The ability to mutually support and be supported by other firebases, the conditions of the soil, since artillery needs proper foundations to be placed upon, the ease to defend the position, and the possibility of supply by air. As you can see, there was a focus that a base could not be cut off easily. Unlike regular artillery that was often arranged in a line formation, the artillery within a firebase was usually positioned in one of three possible shapes: a star, a diamond, or a triangle. This shape was determined by the number of guns within the battery. For a 6-gun battery, the star shape was commonly used, whereas the gun in the center during the night usually fired an illumination round. For a 4-gun battery, the diamond shape was common. And well, you probably have guessed it, the triangle was used for 3-gun batteries. Now, although the layout of a firebase was defensive, it is important to understand that the concept behind it was offensive, which is also indicated by the lack of a snowflake shape. The firebase was not a defensive outpost but an integral part of an offensive effort. Once the field artillery firing unit was moved and positioned, the establishment of a carefully planned firebase allowed the unit to stay in position. The firebase provided protection for firing units, even in the most hostile regions. If a firing unit was brought into position in the morning, by nightfall overhead cover had been constructed. The infantry defenses had been prepared, infantry and artillery defensive fires had been integrated and rehearsed, and mutually supporting fires from distant firebases had been planned and fired. These defensive preparations ensured that the firing unit would always be effective when called upon to serve its function of supporting offensive operations with indirect fire. So let's look at the layout of a firebase. Sadly, the only map was rather abstract. As such, I tried to combine it with written information and a contemporary photo. Yet be aware I'm not entirely sure in some cases, but those are clearly marked. Anyway, we look at Fire Support Base Crook, established in 1969, which was intentionally built to lure the North Vietnamese into combat. US planners hoped that the enemy would see Fire Support Base Crook as an attractive prospect for one of their carefully planned night attacks. Though physically isolated, the base was far from alone. Supporting fire from artillery at other locations as well as from gunships and tactical air elements was arranged around the Fire Support Base perimeter. Here you can see the basic positioning of Crook and its general layout according to Ott's map. The terrain around the base was generally flat, yet there were quite many forests. The fields of fire were limited to 200 meters to the east and 1000 meters in the southwest. Now if we look at a contemporary photo, we can see that the perimeter does not cross the road. Sadly, I don't know if the perimeter was extended or if the outer ring in the map indicates one of the earth berms farther outside. The base itself was rather small. The base was constructed in less than a day. Engineers began by marking a circle on the ground, 80 yards in diameter, to define the outer perimeter of the base. The outer perimeter was protected by earth berms that were created with bulldozers, which also created dugouts for the artillery and important facilities like Fire Direction Center and Command Post. The base was equipped with a 6-gun battery of 105mm howitzers in a star formation setup, as you can clearly see. In terms of infantry, there was one infantry company and elements from mortar, communications and medical platoons. Furthermore, in total 24 bunkers were placed around the perimeter. Note that I'm not entirely sure what exactly is a bunker on this image, yet I assume most of the structures near the perimeter are bunkers since the number in the source was 24. These were created by first blowing a hole in the ground, after which a standard 9-foot bunker with sandbags and steel planking was created within each hole. Bulldozers continued clearing fields of fire outside the perimeter. They cut concentric circles of cleared area 100 to 150 meters and 300 meters beyond the fighting positions to deny cover to the enemy rocket and mortar gunners. I assume that one of these concentric circles is used to show the outside of the base in the map. Now, fire support with Gruk was provided with various sensors, including a ground surveillance radar and a tower. Additionally, early night vision devices called starlight scopes were used as well. Around the base, sensors were placed that could detect enemy movement. Although fields of fires were cleared, there were patches of concealment left, intentionally, that should attract North Vietnamese recon and observer troops. Yet, what was even more important is that the base was part of a larger system. Though physically isolated, the base was far from alone. Supporting fire from artillery at other locations as well as from gunships and tactical air elements was arranged around the fire support base perimeter. Early warning was provided by all available means, including the latest equipment such as sensors, radars, starlight scopes, and patrolling helicopters mounting xenon searchlights. Now you might wonder what is up with the caption Killer Junior. This is directly linked to the rather odd way that artillery was sometimes used during the Vietnam War. Basically, since the First World War, regular artillery was mainly used as an indirect fire weapon. Yet during the defense of fire bases, the use of artillery in a direct fire role was not unusual anymore. As such, several innovations were created, and one of them was called Killer Junior, a direct firing technique. The technique was designed to defend fire bases against enemy ground attack and used mechanical time-fused projectiles set to burst approximately 10 meters off the ground at ranges of 200 to 1000 meters. The name Killer Junior applied to light and medium artillery 105 and 155 mm, whereas Killer Senior referred to the same system used with the 8-inch howitzer. Now for those of you who watched my German World War II artillery tactics video, you might note that this looks rather similar to the diagram of the combination fuse. Yet the main difference here is that Killer Junior was a direct firing technique at very short ranges. As such, it was more dangerous and required very precise fuses that had to be timed perfectly. There were also technological innovations like the so-called beehive round, which was officially named XM546 anti-personnel projectile. Yet Killer Junior was seen as more effective than the beehive round. This was due to the fact that the flechettes of the beehive round could be avoided by going prone, whereas the airburst of the Killer Junior required overhead cover for protection. As such, Killer Junior combined the benefits of direct and indirect fire weapons, although to a limited degree. To summarize, fire bases in Vietnam were a concept that allowed to use the artillery in a war without front lines, and they were quite successful. The fire-base concept surpassed the most optimistic expectations. Occasionally the enemy was able to penetrate the defenses and take a heavy toll of personnel and equipment, but he was never able to take an American fire base. This becomes even more apparent if you consider that in total around 8,000 fire bases were established between 1961 to 1973. Although most of them were temporary, as such only a fraction of that number existed at any given time. If you want to learn more about the Vietnam War, let me know by liking and sharing this video. And if you like well-sourced content like this, consider supporting me. As always, sources are linked in the description. Thank you for watching and see you next time.